made to the images of saints, and divine honors paid to dead men's bones. Against these and similar abominations we protest, describing them in their true colors. How perverse when these flagrant corruptions are manifest, not only to defend them, but cloak their deformity by impudently pretending that they belong to the genuine worship of God. Calvin and the other reformers rejected the false worship of the Roman Catholic Church, and Calvin and the others reinstituted the proper worship of God. Fundamental to Calvin's reformation of worship was his insistence on the proper motivation of worship. Why do we worship? Why do you go to church on Sunday? The proper motivation for worship had been lost in the church of Luther and of Calvin. It had been buried in the worship of the Roman Catholic Church for the motivation for worship. The main motivation for worship had become human merit. Why worship? Why engage in the ceremonies of worship? Why go to church, that is, to Mass? Because by means of worship, we merit with God. That's what Rome made the main motivation for worship. Calvin and the Reformation rejected that motivation for worship. They rejected it and they repudiated it. Instead, Calvin and the Reformation insisted that the proper motivation for worship is gratitude to God. What motivates the entire Christian life must also motivate the highest aspect of the Christian life, the public worship of God. Love for God. Love for God that desires to praise God. Love for God that desires to express gratitude to God. Gratitude for all His blessings. Gratitude for His undeserved grace in salvation. This is the motivation, the proper motivation. In the end, the only motivation for worship. Worship is not, cannot be motivated by the desire to earn something, but the desire to express something, to express our thanks to God. And here is the first and vital connection between the gospel of grace proclaimed by the Reformation and the proper worship of God promoted by the Reformation. The gospel is the gospel of free grace. It is the gospel of justification by faith alone. It is the good news that God has saved, chosen to save in eternity, actually saved in the death of his own dear Son, undeserving sinners such as you and as me. That must inspire, that gospel of grace must inspire us and motivate us to worship God. This is not to deny that worship is edifying. This is not to deny the concern of Calvin and the others for worship, public worship, that builds up the saints. Worship that comforts, that encourages, that strengthens the children of God. Worship that instructs, and by means of instruction develops the members of the congregation from the days of their earliest youth to maturity in the faith. In God's goodness, all of these things belong to the proper worship of his name. And this is God's will for worship. Indeed. But none of these things is the main purpose of worship. The church at the time of the Reformation did not see that. And many churches today do not see this or refuse to see this. The emphasis today is on the worshiper, the one worshiping. The emphasis is on a meaningful worship experience on the part of those who attend the worship services. Churches, therefore, become seeker-friendly, as they say. People are interested in getting something out of the service and frequently complain, I didn't get anything out of the service. But what the people frequently forget is that we do not go to church. We do not engage in worship. First of all, to get something. But we go to church to worship God, to pay to God the honor that his great name deserves. That's worship. Hear what Calvin has to say on this matter from his Institutes. It will not suffice simply to hold that there is one whom all ought to honor and adore, unless we are also persuaded that he is the fountain of every good, and that we must seek nothing elsewhere than in him. A bit later, Calvin says, I call piety that reverence joined with love of God, which the knowledge of his benefits induces. For until men recognize that they owe everything to God, that they are nourished by his fatherly care, that he is the author of every good, that they should seek nothing beyond him, they will never yield him willing service. Nay, unless